There's a moment that catches some people completely off guard. It doesn't happen during anything dramatic. It usually happens in something ordinary. You're laughing at a joke, and mid-laugh, something inside you goes quiet and flat, and you think, do I actually think that's funny? Or am I just doing the thing I always do in this situation? And then the thought spreads. You start reviewing the conversation you're in, the way you're sitting, the tone of voice you're using, and you realize with a kind of slow, creeping clarity that you've been performing. Not lying exactly, not faking exactly, but playing a version of yourself that was calibrated for the room, for the person across from you, for what felt safe and acceptable and socially smooth. And the unsettling part isn't the realization itself. The unsettling part is wondering how long it's been going on. If there's ever been a moment, even one, that was fully and completely just you. If you've ever been in this conversation, please stay with me. You are not broken, you are not fake. And what you're beginning to understand about yourself is one of the most important things a person can wake up to. Today we're going to explore the psychology behind people who realize they've been performing their whole life. Not to dismantle who you are, not to suggest everything you've built is false, but to help you understand why this happens, what it means, and what it actually says about the kind of person you are underneath the performance. Let's start with what the performance actually is, because most people who experience this immediately assume it means they've been dishonest or manipulative. They haven't. The performance we're talking about is something far more human than that. It's the adaptive self, the version of you that learned very early how to read a room and adjust accordingly, how to be a little more agreeable when someone needed that, how to dial back the intensity when it seemed like too much, how to laugh more, share less, be easier to be around. None of those adjustments were deceptions, they were survival tools, and the fact that they became so automatic, so seamlessly woven into how you present yourself, just means they worked. You got very good at something your environment required of you. But here's where it gets interesting. The adaptive self is not the same as the authentic self. And for most of the people sitting with this realization, the gap between those two things has been growing quietly for years. The adaptive self is strategic. It knows what people want to see, and it offers a polished version of that. The authentic self is the part underneath, the one with the stranger interests, the darker thoughts, the questions that don't have clean answers, the needs that aren't always convenient. That self didn't disappear, it just learned to stay off stage. And the longer it stays off stage, the more unfamiliar it becomes, until one day you look in and realize you're not entirely sure who's actually back there. Now, why does this happen in the first place? Because the performance doesn't start as a choice, it starts as a response. For most people who develop a strong performing self, the pattern has roots in early experiences, where being genuinely themselves felt risky in some way. Maybe emotional honesty was met with discomfort or dismissal. Maybe a parent, or a classroom, or a social group sent the message, subtle but consistent, that certain parts of you were too much, too strange, too hard to deal with. You didn't decide to perform, you decided to stay safe. And performance was the technology that made safety possible. What's remarkable about this is how sophisticated the process is. The human brain is extraordinary at pattern recognition, and children in particular are wired to figure out which version of themselves produces connection and which version produces distance or conflict. Once the brain identifies the formula, it starts running it automatically. The performance stops feeling like a performance and starts feeling like just how you are, until something cracks the glass and you see it for what it is. And that crack can come from anywhere. A conversation that touches something too real, a relationship where someone loves you in a way that makes you uncomfortable because you're not sure you've shown them who they're actually loving, a quiet late night when the performance finally runs out of material. And this is the layer that most people don't anticipate, the exhaustion. People who've been performing for years carry a specific kind of fatigue that's hard to explain to someone who hasn't felt it.
It is. It's not physical tiredness exactly.
It's more like the weight of a job you never clocked out of, because the performance requires constant low-level management, monitoring how you're being received, adjusting in real time, editing before you speak, translating what you actually feel into something more presentable before it makes it out of your mouth. That's cognitive and emotional labor running in the background every waking hour. And when you finally name it, when you finally recognize that you've been working this hard just to be in a room with other people, the tiredness makes complete sense. Here's something worth sitting with, though. The realization that you've been performing doesn't mean everything you've built is a lie. The relationships you have are real. The moments of genuine warmth you felt were real. The values you've been living by, even within the performance, were real. The performance wasn't invented out of nothing. It was built on top of something real. It just added layers that maybe weren't necessary. Layers of approval-seeking, conflict avoidance, self-editing that accumulated over time until you couldn't quite see the original foundation underneath. But it's there. And the work of this kind of self-awareness isn't demolition, it's excavation. The question that usually follows the realization is, okay, but who am I actually? And the honest answer is that you're going to have to find out gradually. Authenticity isn't something you recover in a single breakthrough. It's something that emerges slowly in small experiments. Saying the honest thing instead of the smooth thing and seeing what happens. Letting a silence exist instead of filling it. Sharing the unusual interest instead of the relatable one. Sitting with discomfort instead of immediately performing your way out of it. Each of those moments is a small act of showing up as yourself, and over enough of them, a clearer picture starts to form. There's a concept in psychology sometimes called the false self, which describes the persona that develops when a person consistently suppresses their genuine responses in favor of what's expected or accepted. The important thing to understand is that this isn't a pathology, it's a coping structure. And coping structures exist for good reasons. They protected you when you needed protection. The goal isn't to destroy the structure. The goal is to stop living inside it full time, to learn to put it down when you don't actually need it anymore, to become someone who can choose when to adapt without losing access to the person doing the adapting. One thing that helps more than most people expect is finding even one relationship where the performance isn't required. Not a relationship where you dump everything and have no filter whatsoever, but a relationship where the real questions can be asked out loud, where you can say, I'm not sure who I am underneath all of this, and have the other person not flinch. Those relationships act like mirrors. They reflect back something truer than the version most people in your life have been seeing, and they make it safer to practice being real in other places too. The people who arrive at this realization, who look up one day and see the whole machinery of their performing self with sudden clarity, are not people who failed at being authentic. They're people who were perceptive enough to finally see what they'd been doing, which means they're perceptive enough to do something different. That kind of self-awareness is not common. Most people move through their entire lives inside the performance without ever once questioning whether it's them. The fact that you're questioning it means something important about who you actually are. You are not fake. You are not hollow. You are someone who built an extraordinarily functional system for surviving a world that didn't always make it safe to be real. And now you're old enough and maybe tired enough to ask whether you still need it everywhere you've been using it. That question is not a crisis. It's a doorway. You're not broken. You're waking up. And waking up, even when it's disorienting, is always the direction worth moving in. I want to ask you something, and I genuinely want to read your answer in the comments. When was the last time you felt like you weren't performing at all, and what was different about that moment? I think you'll surprise yourself with what comes up. If this kind of grounded, honest psychology content is finding you at the right time, subscribing means the next video will be there when you need it. We're going somewhere close and real again next time. Another quiet truth about the way certain people experience the world and why understanding it changes everything.